Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, 13a. So we finished discussing the burial of Yaakov under the guidance and leadership of Yosef, right? And this came in context of our Mishnah, which coming from the law of the Sotah, which itself is measure for measure. The proceeding of the Sotah is measure for measure to her behavior. The Mishnah that went on to talk about biblical figures who also were rewarded measure for measure. And the Gemara went through each of these figures and analyzed their nature and the stories behind the measure for measure. Beginning with Miriam, well, we had Shimshon, we had others, and last was Yosef, who buried his father. And as a result, measure for measure, no one greater than Yosef at that time to give great honor to his father to bury him. So when it came time for Yosef to be buried, for measure, the greatest of that generation buried him, namely Moshe Rabbeinu himself. And then Moshe Rabbeinu, no one greater than him, and he himself took care of Yosef's burial. So for Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem himself buried him.
Seems like the Torah is spending a lot of human terms energy for to teach us about measure for measure.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, important.
Yeah.
Sotah.
It's measure for measure is a cornerstone of on the simple level, it's a cornerstone of divine justice. But I would go with not just justice, but also the divine system. You know, the system is such that a person reaps what they sow, both materially and spiritually. And thus, it's a very key component in our lives. So it would follow that there is that time and energy invested to make the point and explain it.
Yeah, everything seems like a reflection of our.
That's right. Our relationship is a reflection. That's right. Our relationship with God is a reflection. That's what we invest, is what we reap, right? But in greater measure, right? Because you mentioned before that the measure for measure for good is such that the reward is is parallel with the effort, but far exceeds the effort quantitatively, perhaps. So, well, even qualitatively also, perhaps. But the point is they match each other. In other words, if one invests in a relationship with Hashem that's loving, then the love comes back. The love from Hashem is immensely greater than the love that I express to Hashem.
Metaphor of the eye of the needle.
Yeah, that's right. Give me the Hashem says, "Open for me up the eye of the needle, and I will open up for you like the opening of the temple chamber, which is a massive door." Yeah. At any rate, so the Gemara now is going through each of these these biblical historical characters and analyzing them and events. So we finished analyzing the events surrounding the burial of Yaakov, and now we get to the burial of Yosef, and then the burial of Moshe after that. So let's see. It's about halfway down from the top of the page, lower from halfway down, 13a, I'm sorry, Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. Last two words in the line, Tan Rabbanon, Tafresh, and this is boy. You see it there? Last two words in the line. There's a colon, and then Tafresh and Ba.
Yeah, I see it. Okay.
So Tan Rabbanon, our sages taught in Mishnaic age text. Bo Re'eh, come and see. Kama chavivos mitzvos al Moshe Rabbeinu. How precious were commandments to Moshe Rabbeinu. Why is that? She calls Yisrael, all the Jewish people, kulan, all of them, when they were leaving Egypt, Misaska were busy with babiza, with spoils. The literal meaning of this is that they were busy taking what was owed to them by the Egyptians, but material wealth. And this is also reflected in the Bizas Hayam, after the, I think it's specifically talking about that, when after the sea was split and the Jews walked through, there was all kinds of spoils that and wealth that emerged from the ocean that was drowned with the Egyptians, and the Jews were busy collecting that. But Moshe Rabbeinu, Nisasik but mitzvahs, he was involved in mitzvahs, not just involved in collecting the spoils, but busy with mitzvahs, meaning the mitzvah of taking care of Yosef. Sheneman, there's a verse that backs up this idea. Chacham Lev, the one who is wise at heart, Yikach mitzvahs, takes mitzvahs. This is a verse, and I'm going to look at the bottom here where it quotes the verse. Oops. Wait, no, it doesn't. The verse is on it's on the left here. It's a verse in Mishlei, Proverbs 10:8. Chacham Lev Yikach mitzvahs, the wise at heart takes mitzvahs. The evils fatayim you love it, but the fool just kind of withers away. His lips, love it, is like they wither. So Moshe Rabbeinu has the wise one who takes involved in mitzvahs. And I might go even further here and say, even deeper still, on a spiritual level, the spoils of Egypt might also mean the spiritual spoils, in that the Jews who left Egypt took with them the divine sparks embedded in Egypt. That's their job, is to elevate the divine sparks. That's what we learn in Kabbalah. But in fact, we learn that there are a total of Reish Peches, 288 nitzitzes, sparks. There are a total of 288 sparks. I'm not going to go through all the calculations how we get to this number, but there's a total of 288 sparks spread throughout the world through history. These are general sparks that break down into multiple sparks that are to be elevated throughout our world. And the verse says, "V'gam eirev rav olo itam," and a multitude of a mixed multitude left Egypt with the Jewish people, which literally means other people who came from other nations that mixed into them, which caused problems later on. But so the Kabbalah understands this to mean Erev Rav, the mixed, that is to say, the sparks that are mixed into Egypt, Rav, that equal the number 202, right? Reish Beis is 202, so we're Rav, multitude. So 202 sparks elevated with them when they left Egypt. And ever since then, all we've been busy with is the remaining 86. The remaining 86 sparks. And this then might be the spoils that the Jews are collecting, spiritual spoils, reaping the physical reward, the material reward, but also reaping the spiritual reward for their servitude in Egypt, the sparks, the elevated sparks that they dragged with them. But Moshe Rabbeinu didn't take the time to think about, how am I doing and where's my spiritual status? Do I have my sparks with me or not? Moshe Rabbeinu was concerned solely with, what are my responsibilities? Forge ahead with my responsibilities. So if we had in the previous Gemara discussion on not being allured by materialistic distractions,
What is my
responsibility? Right? So if we had in the previous Gemara this idea of staying away from or avoiding materialistic distractions, we had that by Esau's eyes falling out of his head. Right? This idea of avoiding the distractions of the material world. Now perhaps we're learning from Moshe Rabbeinu to ignore even the spiritual distractions, which is a much more subtle distraction. There's the distraction of our desire to take stock and classify where we stand on spiritual standing and observe our past behaviors and say, did we get to our goals? Did we reach the spiritual height that we wanted? And at times this is appropriate, but at times it's not. And specifically when we have responsibilities and in our time, we have responsibilities before us, it's not a time to take stock, it's time to move forward ahead. This, by the way, is how the Rebbe explains the Gemara. It says that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, before he died, he said, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, one of the greatest leaders of the Jewish people of all time, he led the Jewish people during the time of the destruction of the temple, in a very precarious time, and solidified our future by negotiating with Vespasian to hold on to the yeshiva, the Torah study. So he's a serious leader who accomplished a huge amount in his life. But he told the students, I don't know which way they're taking me. When he dies, are they taking me to hell or to heaven? And the obvious question is what? He doesn't know where he's going. He doesn't know that he did well in life. What's going on here? The classic explanation is humility. But Chassidus does not like humility that comes along with lying about yourself. Chassidus is a recurring theme when it comes to humility and the way Chassidus sees it versus the way it's sometimes seen in classic literature. I'm talking about even within Jewish literature. Humility is often seen as a kind of, I don't want to say lying to yourself, but a kind of like ignoring truths about yourself. Oh, look, I'm so humble, I'm not so smart. And Chassidus doesn't like it because it's just lying. It's just not true. It's not honest. And humility cannot go with dishonesty. And humility, therefore, is understood not that a person doesn't know what he's capable of. He knows very well what he's capable of. He knows very well what his gifts are, but acknowledges that there's gifts from God, and there's the humility to be completely honest about what you have and understand that what you have is a gift. That's really what humility is. So, because that's the way we look at humility, it would be hard to say that Yochanan ben Zakkai didn't know which way he was going out of humility. He was being humble and saying, I'm not sure if I'm going to heaven or hell. That's just, you're fooling yourself. Come on. So Chassidus has two different explanations. One is more common in the early works of Chassidus, and then the second, which I'm going to share with you, is the Rebbe's explanation. The Rebbe explained that Yochanan ben Zakkai was so busy doing his work that he never had time to take stock of, has he accomplished enough spiritually? Because there was always something to do. There was always a responsibility he had to take on. There was always a problem to solve. There was always someone to help. There was always something to get accomplished. And because he was so busy accomplishing, he never took the time to reflect on, where do I stand in life? And now on his deathbed, he says, well, I don't know where I stand in life. I've never taken stock. Because I've been so busy getting the job done. And this is perhaps what's going on over here as well. On one level, yes, the Jewish people are collecting material spoils, but on a deeper level, the Jewish people are collecting spiritual spoils. They're collecting the sparks that have been elevated throughout their time in Egypt. But Moshe Rabbeinu didn't busy himself with that. Moshe Rabbeinu stayed focused on what are his responsibilities.
So
He was like a Yochanan ben Zakkai. That's correct. What are my responsibilities? I got to take care of Yosef. I'm going to take care of Yosef. Spoils and not spoils, we'll work that out later.
So it's a true sense of humility, rather than
That's correct. It's a true sense of humility rather than a false sense of humility. That's right.
That's very rare.
Yeah, it is.
Commodity there.
Yes, it is. I'll go even further, but this is off topic, but I'll just go even further. That when someone plays false humility, it's actually arrogance.
For sure.
Oh, no, I'm not so smart. Oh, no, I'm not so good at it.
Yeah, until someone says it. Yeah, you're right.
Where's that coming from when a person says that? It's not humility, because the person in their own mind knows that they're not saying the truth. So where does it come from? It comes from a motivation to be seen as humble, because it isn't truly humble to yourself. So in a sense, it's actually arrogance. I want people to know I'm humble, so I'm going to deny the truths I know about myself. It's not true. It's not it's not honest.
There's also different levels within that false humility.
There's a spectrum, obviously. There's definitely a spectrum.
Yeah.
There's definitely a spectrum. But humility is to acknowledge what you're capable of doing, and acknowledge your gift, be honest about what your gifts are, and recognize that these are not earned. These are gifts from Hashem. It's not humble for someone who has millions of dollars in his account to lie about the millions of dollars in his account. It's not humble. It doesn't mean he has to go brag about how much money he has in his account. But humble doesn't mean to deny it. Humble is to, first of all, a person doesn't talk about it, to flaunt it. But humble is to acknowledge that this is all a gift from Hashem and give charity when he can, without asking for recognition. That's humility. That's humility. I'll give you a story. I'll tell you a story to make this point. My father's father, my grandfather, he lived in Big Well. He's 93, 94 years old. Still goes an hour walk every day. I mentioned this in the other days. Ever since his retirement, he's been sitting and learning Torah. For the last 25 years, like that, every day he's busy. He's a very busy man because he's got classes he's got to attend, and he takes his walk every day. He's a remarkable person. He's not a long-bearded, holy rabbi guy. He was a very successful businessman back in his day, and gave lots and lots of charity. So he was on the board of the yeshiva, the local Chabad school there, which was like a big umbrella organization that had all kinds of institutions under it. The shul was like it's like one big center, one big community center. The boys' school, the girls' school, the seminary, the mikveh, the library, the kollel, all the Chabad institutions are like under this one massive umbrella / campus, which takes up like 2 blocks. It's huge.
Oh, sounds nice.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. With, I don't know, 7, 8 buildings maybe. I mean, it's just a really beautiful, massive campus. It's a big campus, yes, that includes a boys' school, girls' school, a seminary, a kollel. I mean, it's a very remarkable institution.
That's great.
At any rate, so my grandfather was the secretary of this institution right from its inception, right from the beginning. My late uncle took his position when he retired, as secretary. At any rate, yeah. So as secretary, my grandfather would often foot the bill for a lot of the shortfalls that was going on. And I once asked my grandfather, and I know sometimes that when he gave money, he was annoyed. I don't want to say annoyed about it, but he gave money, which in his mind, they could have got it somewhere else, but they failed to, and the bill had to be paid, so he forked it out, essentially.
Right.
So it wasn't like he was being solicited and they put his name, even though his name is on one of the buildings, but most of the money he gave was not solicited like, oh, Mr. New, you want to dedicate XYZ classroom, can you put your name on it, and we'll give X amount. Most of it was just like, the bills have to be paid because the teachers are out, and we don't have anything, so let's just write out a check. And no one's putting his name anywhere for that. It's most of the money he gave in his lifetime. So I once asked him, we were sitting at the Ring together Shabbos afternoon, saying a little l'chaim, and I asked him, Zayda, like, why'd you give so much money? How'd you do that? Why'd you give so much away just like that without thinking? So he told me without even batting an eyelid, I didn't even think about it. He just said, so because I am not talented enough to be a teacher, therefore I get to be wealthy. Like he could never be a teacher, acknowledge that. Could never sit in a classroom and teach. So he went into business and therefore he gets to be rich. And the guy who's doing the more important work teaching gets to not have a paycheck. What? It was so obvious to him because to him, his money wasn't my money. It's a gift from Hashem. So like, I deserve it more than the teacher just because I happen to be in business. He didn't even have to think about it. Without batting an eyelid, that's what he answered me. I think about it often, like, your gifts are yours. So you deserve to have all these gifts in life. Who told you? That's real humility. Not to lie about how much charity he gave. He knows how much charity he gave. And if you talk about it, he'll share it. But it's with a sense of humility because like with me, what I've done, this is Hashem's gifts. I just gives. Because why shouldn't he? It's a remarkable thing. Nice. So I shouldn't say the story because I don't remember the details, but it was something to the effect of he went on a fundraising trip. I have to get the details. The bottom line is he found out that there was a teacher in the school that he was a secretary of that wanted to redo his kitchen, but couldn't afford it. And at the time, my grandfather happened to be redoing his kitchen for his wife. He happened to be redoing his kitchen at home. And this contrast of my grandfather redoing his kitchen and a teacher not redoing the kitchen, someone on the board used it as a pitch to a fundraising pitch, and saying like, why is it fair that the teacher can't redo his kitchen? Like, as a pitch to get to. My grandfather came home and told his wife I don't remember exactly the story. The bottom line was to call the teacher's wife and tell them to come look at our kitchen because we're making them the exact same kitchen. I can't remember the exact details of the story, but just ultimately at this point, that's what humility is. Not to deny what you have, but to acknowledge what you have and know that it's a gift from Hashem, not yours. Anyway, so back to Moshe Rabbeinu here. So while everybody else is busy collecting the spoils, whether spiritual or material spoils, Moshe Rabbeinu stayed focused on what his job is, and his job is to take Yosef to be buried, and that's what he stayed busy with without getting distracted. Now the Gemara tells us the following. There's two versions to the story, and perhaps we'll do one today and another on Monday. So the Gemara says like this: from where did he know Moshe Rabbeinu? From where did Moshe Rabbeinu know? Heichon Yosef Kavor. How did Moshe Rabbeinu know where Yosef was buried? It's interesting that the Gemara even has this question. Well, why shouldn't we know where Yosef's buried? We know what lots of people.
What was the question? Sorry.
How did Moshe Rabbeinu know where Yosef was buried? And the Gemara is going to give two versions to the story of how Yosef discovered where he was buried. And it's just interesting that the Gemara even asks the question, well, why shouldn't we know? We know where lots of people are buried. I mean, how many years is it from Moshe Rabbeinu coming to take Yosef to when Yosef was buried? 210 years. It's a long time, but I mean, we can identify graves from 210 years ago, can't we? Sure we can. Certainly someone like Yosef.
Where he was buried in Egypt.
Yeah. Where did we, yes, right, sorry. Right. Okay, I should rephrase that, right. How did Moshe Rabbeinu know where Yosef was buried in Egypt to go find him and take him to Israel? And I'm just pointing out this question itself is kind of funny, because like, why wouldn't we know where he's buried? Especially someone like Yosef, who was second to the king. Certainly he's buried somewhere with like, a big tomb, a stone or something. Like, why would they not know? And what's the issue? Why shouldn't he know where it is?
Why shouldn't he know?
Yeah, why shouldn't he know? And maybe it's a cultural thing where they hid the places of burial, but I don't think that's the Egyptian culture. On the contrary, they mummified their kings and they put them into tombs with big signs of who's here and who's where. Right? I don't think that they hid.
I was down there in those tombs.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't think they hid them. They didn't hid them from their people.
They did later on because of poachers and
right, but so I don't know
that's
that
modernist.
it's probably more modern. Yeah. At any rate, I'm just maybe it's a cultural thing that I'm missing. I don't know, or perhaps this gets to the fact that the Egyptians wanted to retain the spiritual power that Yosef has, and thus they hid it from the Jewish people. They understand that there's a spiritual struggle between the Jewish people and between Egypt, and Egypt understands that all of divine energy invested in this world comes through the Jewish people, comes through holiness, and therefore they need, when they want to hold on to that, to keep the spiritual power it gives. We've often compared spiritual negative forces, klippa, to a parasite on the body. And the parasite requires healthy tissue to live. The healthier the tissue, the bigger the parasite, until it eventually kills its host and itself. So if Egypt is this klippa, it's a parasite leeching off divine energy that flows through holiness, then they want to hold on to that, all that divine holiness, that they can live for as long as they can and as most prosperous as they can. And therefore, perhaps they hid Yosef in their own, because they wanted to hold on to the spiritual power that he brings with it. And that, if this is correct, would help further explain the story as the Gemara is about to describe it. So the Gemara answering the question, how did Moshe Rabbeinu know where Yosef was buried in Egypt? So the Gemara says like this, Amru, it was said as follows, telling us how Moshe Rabbeinu discovered where Yosef is being held in Egypt. Sarach bas Asher, Sarach, who was the daughter of Asher, one of the tribes, Nishtayra ma'osi adar, she was still alive from that generation. She still remembers her uncle Yosef, and she's still alive. A long time, she must have lived a very long time. Sarah bas Asher Nishtayra ma'osi adar, and Sarah bas Asher was still alive from that generation. She must have been very, very old. So halach Moshe etlo, Moshe went to her, she's the elder. Amar la, and Moshe told her, Klumat yodat, heichon Yosef cover. Do you perhaps know where Yosef is buried? In Egypt. Amar la, she told him, Aron shamatachas asolai mitzriyim. The Egyptians made a coffin of metal. The kavuhu benilus, and the word used here is not that they sunk it in the Nile. The word for sunk would be with a test, tavu. They sunk it in the Nile. Here it says kavu. They affixed it in the Nile, which further what's it called? Further supports my contention. They actually were actively trying to hide it. So it doesn't say that they sunk it in the Nile. That would have been with a test, tavu. But here it's with a kuf, kavu. They fixed it in the Nile. As if to say that they stuck it there and they wanted to stay there. For what reason? Further to support what I'm saying. Today she's baruch meimav, because they wanted the waters of the Nile to be blessed. The waters of the Nile is our source of life. This is the ultimate parasite, right? Their source of life comes from the Nile, quite literally. The Nile, which flows up from the Red Sea into the Mediterranean, flows up as in south to north, and that's their irrigation system. They create ducts and like veins of,
Like tributaries, I guess, right?
what's it called?
Is that the word? Tributary, like branches?
Yeah, branches of river.
Branch off of the
They're just dug holes,
Yeah, trenches and
trenches.
like irrigation.
an irrigation system from the Nile to,
Yeah.
yes. So quite literally, that was their source of life.
That's
And also they worship the Nile. So it was their
Yeah.
spiritual life too,
That's
right?
interesting,
So embedded in their idol, they know that if you want to get, even if idols want energy, it has to have embedded in there some divine energy, because all life must come from divinity. And therefore they were like, like Kabbalah explains that divine energy that's invested in Klippa, negative forces, is in exile, because it's giving life to that which is in opposition to its truth. Divine energy, there is no source of life other than God himself. So even negativity exists from God. It's in Tanya. It's what we talk about in Tanya quite a bit.
This week, it talks about
Yeah, that's right. It's in this week's Tanya. That's correct. That's right.
Right.
It's a big subject in this week's Tanya. That's right. That divine energy is held in exile to give life to that which is opposite to him. So we use the example of healthy tissue that's in exile giving life to a parasite. So they knew that. They had to hold the ultimate source of divine energy, Yosef himself, buried in their own idol to give it life.
An exact parallel.
It's a perfect parallel.
He was like an idol to them.
Sorry?
He was like an idol to them.
He was trapped in their idol,
Yeah.
right?
It's funny
And then becomes a source of life for their idol, right? She's Baruch Hu, that their idol should be blessed because of Yosef.
But that just proves to them that their idols really had no power.
That's the irony. Idol worshippers, in its original form, describes the Rambam at least, don't necessarily deny the truth of God. But they just figure the best way to access God is by going through these mediums. And that's the ultimate insult. Right? Not to acknowledge that all this stuff have no independence. Right? So idol worship itself, to exist, requires to leech on to healthy divine energy. And that's what they're burying, they're positioning Yosef in their Nile, in their denial, in their Nile.
Real source.
In theirs, exactly. To give it life. She's Baruch Hu Mimah, that the waters be blessed. Okay, so it's trapped in there. Moshe's got to retrieve it.
What you just said.
Yeah.
Why did we go to the Rebbe to ask him for a blessing? Why don't we go direct?
That's a very good question. And perhaps the Gemara is going to address it later in some way. But the short answer is, all Jewish people, this comes from the Talmud Sotah, famously, and the Rebbe expounded upon this. All Jewish people are not separate entities. We're one body, And in the same way, if this is the example that the Chassam Sofer gives. If my arm is hurting, and I go to the doctor and I say to the doctor, "Can you please help me?" It's not, my mouth is not an intermediary talking on behalf of my arm. It's one me, and it's much better off for the arm if my mouth talks to the doctor than it itself. So the same thing is true of the Jewish people. We're all one body. So Moshe Rabbeinu, the Rebbe speaking on our behalf, is not an intermediary speaking on our behalf. It's our own head speaking on our behalf. It's like my mouth speaking on behalf of my arm. It's one me. Following?
I think
So,
it's the classic example isn't it the court case over the books?
yes, that was the point. That was the point that they wanted to make. That's correct. That was the point of that court case. That's correct. So some Sefer writes, for example, it says that that when a person prays for another person, he should feel his pain. When one Jew prays for another, feeling the pain of another Jew is to understand that his pain is my pain, because we're one. And therefore, me praying is not me as an intermediary speaking on behalf of another Jew.
We're all one.
We're all one. Like if like for example, I think this comes from the Gemara as well. I think the Yerushalmi, that revenge on another Jew is like the right arm, which got cut by the left arm, saying, "I'm going to revenge the left arm and cut it back."
That's like self-destruction.
No one's going to do that, because it's one entity, and therefore that's right. So when we see all of Jews as one, I mean, revenge against another Jew is revenge on me. It's not helpful.
They usually have become sick physically.
That's right.
Because of their hatred
for themselves, and that's really what the relationship with other Jews. So going to a Rebbe to speak on our behalf is not, God forbid, an intermediary. It's the source of my own soul talking for me, because that's the truth of me.
But the person who's doing that
has to understand this. It's correct. And here's the interesting part. So that gets to the next point, which is, why the finger feels pain when it gets cut? because it's connected to the brain. There's a central nervous system in the brain that sends signals to the finger, you're cut, you should start hurting. So which means, therefore, that if you want to feel spiritual sensitivity, you have to be connected to a Rebbe. Because the Rebbe is the head of the Jewish people. If I want to feel sensitivity to another Jew, I want to feel sensitivity to God, then I have to be connected to the essence of my body, which is all other Jews, specifically the center of that body, the Rebbe, the Jewish, the Moshe Rabbeinu, the Rebbe, which is the heart of the people. So it's not an intermediary, but rather connecting to who I truly am, connecting to my spiritual body of other Jewish people, at the head being the Rebbe. And I think that this is actually going to come clear, not today, but maybe on Monday we'll see the part of the Gemara where the Gemara is going to indicate that. The Gemara is going to equate the casket of Joseph with the ark in which the two tablets were. The Gemara is going to equate the two, and perhaps that will be understood based on what we just said. And we'll elaborate when we get to the Gemara.
So what's the proper way to ask the Rebbe for a blessing for? Not to say my wife is sick. Somebody is sick.
Yeah. So, dear Rabbi, please pray on behalf of so and so. That's it. Or please bless so and so.
Or I've heard it's also like when you write a letter, say, in the merit of the Rabbi,
So that's one.
Hashem.
Right. So now you're not talking to Rebbe anymore. You're talking to God, which is one way of doing it. But over here it's different. So one thing is you're talking to God and saying, on behalf of the tzaddik here, please bless me. But that would be like the finger talking to the doctor. You want the mouth to talk to the doctor. Hashem is the doctor. You want the mouth to talk to the doctor. So you address the Rebbe directly. Rebbe, you feel my soul more than I feel my own soul.
You describe it, yeah.
Yeah. So please, Rebbe, pray on my behalf.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just like you would ask your fellow Jew to say Tillim on behalf of others or so on.
Great way of explaining it.
Comes from Chassam Sofer and explained by the Rebbe. Okay, so let's see. Okay, no, stop over here. So running out of time. But on Monday, we'll get to how Moshe Rabbeinu retrieved
Sarah did mention something?
Sarah told her that he's been fixed in the Nile. So Moshe Rabbeinu goes to the Nile and retrieves Yosef from the Nile. We're going to see a different version to the same story, that Yosef was actually buried somewhere else. And there was a different method by which Yosef's casket was found. And then we're going to learn the comparison of the casket of Yosef and the ark in which there was the tablets. So that's all coming up, God willing, next week.
You didn't have to ask all those questions.
Cliffhanger.
You just gone in and use the metal detector.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point that I'm still thinking about. Why metal? So seemingly they put metal because it doesn't corrode and because it doesn't float. And the Gemara is actually going to discuss that. How is it that metal floated? It was miraculous that it floated. But I'm wondering if we can find some sort of more spiritual significance in that metal represents.
Layer of metal over wood or something. Like,
No, that we're going to see. But it's clear that there's a miracle to the floating thing, which we're going to learn about. But I'm looking to see, I'm trying to find how metal might signify, spiritually speaking, a way of trapping a holiness.
well, the ark was metal outside.
The ark was gold, wood, gold.
Gold overlaid wood.
The ark which the two tablets were, was gold, wood, gold.
Yeah.
With 3 boxes. Yeah.
With gold.
Yeah. But I'm wondering how metal might be a spiritual significance of this idea of trapping holiness, right? Because they use that to trap Yosef into their Nile to get it blessed, right? So I've been thinking about what that might mean. I'm thinking about it more over Shabbos.
Stay down.
Yeah, so on a physical level, it's because it doesn't corrode and because it doesn't float. And Moshe had to miraculously make it float, as we'll see. But I'm looking for the spiritual meaning behind that, and maybe we'll think about that over
You're
Shabbos.
saying it doesn't corrode?
Metal? Not
Well,
as fast as wood.
It has iron in it, it'll corrode.
It could rot. It can get rusty. It can get not rot. It can get rusted, but it certainly lasts longer than
Oh,
wood
yeah.
does.
Well,
They haven't discovered plastic yet, so
For him, they wouldn't use metal.
it seems they used
He was the top man there. They
they,
don't use metal on him. They use gold or silver.
like a fancy metal.
Precious
Yeah,
metal.
could
yeah,
have pushed.
it would
Yeah,
be-
that's
it
possible.
would be like a.
Would be a cheap
steel.
metal. It would be a more expensive metal. Yeah, perhaps.
Could be,
But the Gemara doesn't say that though. It just says metal with matefes. But I guess it doesn't say what kind of metal, I guess. So it could have been any.
If it were gold or silver, it probably would have been stated as such, right?
It might have, yeah.
Precious.
Anyway, I want to think about it more, exactly what the significance of metal
Yeah,
is.
yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, have a wonderful day and
Good day.
good Erev Shabbos. This week's Shabbos Mevorachim, by the way. Tehillah, right?
Oh, it is,
Isn't it?
22.
Today's the 22nd.
No, it'd be 29, right? 22. Oh, 29.
So today's the 22nd. So tomorrow 23rd, which means Rosh Chodesh is what, Friday? Right? Rosh Chodesh, there's 2 days of Rosh Chodesh. No, sorry. No, 1 second, yeah.
If it's the 29th, yeah. If it's the 29th.
Rosh Chodesh is going to be on next Shabbos. So this week is Shabbos Mevorachim. So it's Tehillim this week, yeah.
Oh, Shabbos. Extra
When Rosh Chodesh is Shabbos and the Shabbos before is...
Torah scroll.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, have a wonderful day and good Erev Shabbos.